This is the story of the one. As a custodial supervisor at a high school, he knows that during cold and flu season, germs spread fast. It's why he partners with Grainger to stay fully stocked on the products and supplies he needs, from tissues to disinfectants to floor scrubbers. All so that he can help students, staff, and teachers stay healthy and focused. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
What if I told you that every yoga class, meditation app, and spiritual workshop you've ever encountered was essentially invented by Victorian gentlemen, in top hats, probably, performing elaborate magical ceremonies in secret London lodges? What if the entire New Age movement traces back to three middle-class guys who were obsessed with ancient Egypt magic and decided to bring it back for modern times? Today, we're uncovering how the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn accidentally created the entire framework for spirituality seeking as we know it. So there's London, 1888. Jack the Ripper was off doing his thing. Everyone's wearing too many layers of clothing, probably sweating a lot. And these three regular guys are sitting around basically plotting to overthrow all of Christianity. These weren't stereotypical rebels either. Dr. William Wynne Westcott spent his days examining dead bodies as a coroner. Dr. William Woodman was a retired army doctor. Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers worked at a museum and liked to pretend he was Scottish nobility. Their big idea was to bring back magic. Not like party tricks or card games, but actual magic. They wanted to revive all the ancient Egyptian stuff, medieval alchemy, Renaissance occultism, the whole mystical buffet. They called themselves the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and they were completely serious about turning ordinary Victorian folks into legitimate magicians who could chat with angels. Here's the thing, though. The timing was absolutely perfect. Darwin had basically blown up traditional religion at the time. People were obsessed with seances and talking to dead relatives, and educated folks were desperate for something that felt both ancient and scientific. The Golden Dawn offered exactly the package deal. They created these incredibly elaborate initiation ceremonies, designed fancy magical tools, and wrote step-by-step guides for achieving what they called knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. Basically, they promised you could have a personal relationship with your own divine guardian spirit if you followed their program. What started as three bored middle-class guys with a serious manuscript obsession became the blueprint for pretty much every modern spiritual practice you can think of. Yoga classes, meditation apps, chakra healing, manifestation workshops, it all goes back to what these Victorian magicians figured out in their secret London meetings. The wild part is who actually joined this thing. We're talking about some serious heavy hitters. W.B. Yeats, who won the Nobel Prize for Poetry, spent decades trying to have mystical visions through their rituals. Bram Stoker was doing Golden Dawn practices while writing Dracula. Arthur Conan Doyle was balancing Sherlock Holmes stories with investigating ghosts and psychics. These weren't basement-dwelling weirdos. These are A-list intellectuals of their time, spending their evenings trying to summon Egyptian gods. The most notorious member was definitely Aleister Crowley. He showed up as this young Cambridge graduate and immediately started pushing every boundary they had. While everyone else was approaching magic with scholarly respect, Crowley treated it like extreme sports. He cranked every ritual up to 11, experimented with drugs and sex magic, and eventually got himself banned for being too intensive, even for a group of Victorian occultists. Then there was Florence Farr. She's an actress and an early feminist who became one of their most powerful members. She developed a lot of their core meditation techniques and spent years translating Egyptian magical texts. And the fact that the Golden Dawn gave women real authority was revolutionary. Regular Victorian society barely let women own property, but these folks were teaching them to command archangels. What made all of these people so influential was their whole approach. Earlier magic was either folk stuff passed down through families or academic exercises locked away in libraries. The Golden Dawn created something completely new, a systematic program that regular educated people could actually follow. They took medieval alchemy, Renaissance magic, and ancient mystery school teachings, then turned it all into this coherent spiritual development system. Their lodges became like laboratories for consciousness, places where Victorian professionals could experiment with altered states while keeping their day jobs respectable. It was underground spirituality for the educated middle class. The Golden Dawn's big breakthrough was treating magic like it was actual science. They created these incredibly detailed charts, linking colors, numbers, Hebrew letters, astrology symbols, and Egyptian gods into one massive system they called the Tree of Life. This was their attempt to basically map human consciousness, like creating a periodic table for spiritual experiences. Their rituals were designed with serious psychological thought behind them. Members would spend months memorizing complex symbol systems, practicing visualization exercises, and doing ceremonial work meant to gradually expand their awareness. That famous Golden Dawn pentagram ritual that thousands of people still do today was basically moving meditation using physical gestures, Hebrew god names, and color visualization to achieve altered consciousness states. What they were really doing was developing the first Western version of what we now call mindfulness training. Their meditation techniques, breathing exercises, and visualization practices were all designed to give people direct experience of what they called their higher self. The psychological insights they developed were decades ahead of their time. They understood the unconscious mind, how symbols affect consciousness, and the connection between mental states and physical health long before Freud made any of it mainstream. The Golden Dawn also pioneered this idea that spiritual development should be hands-on rather than just intellectual. Instead of just reading about mystical states, members were expected to actually achieve them through practice. They created a whole curriculum where you'd start with basic meditation and visualization, then gradually work your way up to more complex magical operations. The structure they developed became the template for basically every modern spiritual training program. The idea of progressive levels, initiation ceremonies, group work combined with individual practice, using ancient symbols and techniques adapted for contemporary people, all of that comes directly from what the Golden Dawn figured out in Victorian London. So, what did these Victorian magicians actually do in their secret meetings? The Golden Dawn created this elaborate educational system that was part university, part mystery school, and part therapy group. New members started with the basic grade Neophyte, where they learned fundamental concepts like the 4 elements, basic Hebrew letters, and simple meditation techniques. The genius part was how they structured everything. Each grade had specific knowledge you had to master, rituals you had to perform, and psychological states you were expected to achieve. It was like getting a degree in consciousness, except instead of writing papers, you were learning to invoke archangels and achieve mystical visions. The heart of their system was this thing called the Tree of Life, basically a map of reality that shared how divine energy flows down from the highest spiritual levels into physical manifestation. Members would spend years studying this diagram, memorizing which colors, numbers, angels, and concepts corresponded to each level. It sounds incredibly nerdy, and it was, but it gave them a framework for understanding that every aspect of human experience came from a magical perspective. Their daily practices were surprisingly practical, morning and evening rituals that combined prayer, meditation, and energy work, divination using tarot cards that they redesigned based on their magical correspondences, pathworking meditations where they would visualize traveling through different spiritual realms, dream journals to track their unconscious development, regular group ceremonies for holidays, major holidays, and personal initiations. What made it work was the psychological sophistication underlying everything. These weren't random magical practices cobbled together from old books. The Golden Dawn understood that consistent ritual practice could genuinely transform consciousness. Their techniques were designed to gradually break down ordinary mental barriers and then open people up to expanded states of awareness. The social aspect was crucial too. Members formed intense bonds through shared ritual experiences and study groups. They had this whole culture of magical names, secret handshakes, elaborate costumes, and private jokes that created a sense of being a part of something special and important. It was like joining the world's most exclusive spiritual fraternity. By the early 1900s, Golden Dawn techniques were spreading far beyond their original London lodges. Former members were starting their own groups, publishing books, and teaching watered-down versions of their practices to the general public. The whole modern New Age movement basically grew out of Golden Dawn alumni sharing what they'd learned with increasingly broader audiences. Here's what I find really interesting about it. Practically everything you associate with modern spirituality can be traced back to what these Victorian magicians created. That yoga class you've been taking, the meditation techniques come from Golden Dawn visualization practices. Chakra healing, they mapped those energy centers onto their tree of life system. Manifestation and law of attraction, Golden Dawn members were doing ritual work to attract specific outcomes over a century ago. The New Age movement basically took Golden Dawn techniques and made them accessible to regular people. All those books about ancient wisdom, crystal healing, and connecting with your higher self are watered-down versions of what Golden Dawn initiates were practicing in full ceremonial regalia. Even modern Wicca and neo-paganism borrowed heavily from their ritual structures and magical correspondences. What's fascinating is how their approach spread into mainstream culture. Jungian psychology incorporated many of their insights about symbols in the unconscious mind. The human potential movement of the 1960s was essentially secularized Golden Dawn techniques. Today's mindfulness and wellness industries are marketing the same basic practices these Victorian magicians developed, just without the Egyptian god names and elaborate costumes. The Golden Dawn proved that you could create systematic spiritual experiences using psychological techniques disguised as ancient wisdom. They understood that people need ritual, symbolism, and community to achieve genuine transformation. They also figured out that spiritual development works best when it's structured like education, with clear levels, specific practices, and gradual progression toward mastery. The real legacy is how they changed our entire conception of what spirituality could be. Before the Golden Dawn, you were either born into a religious tradition or you were basically out of luck. They created the idea that spiritual development was something you could actually pursue, that ancient wisdom could be adapted for modern people, and that regular folks could achieve extraordinary states of consciousness through dedicated practice. The world we live in right now, where spiritual seeking is normal and expected, we have the Golden Dawn to thank for that.